Imagine an era when women were still fighting for their basic rights, a time when the idea of a woman stepping into a wrestling ring was not just unheard of, but frowned upon, yet there was one woman who dared to challenge the norms. In a time when the world was a very different place, when societal norms and expectations were rigid and unyielding, there emerged a figure who would redefine the course of history. This was an era when women were expected to conform, to fit into the molds society had crafted for them. Their dreams were often confined within the walls of their homes, their ambitions dictated by the whims of the world around them. Amidst such stifling norms, imagine a woman who dared to dream beyond these barriers. A woman who not only dared to dream but also possessed the courage to pursue these dreams. Picture a woman stepping into an arena dominated by men, not just stepping in but shining, defying every norm, every expectation, and every stereotype. Now imagine this happening in the world of wrestling, a sport that was, and still is, largely dominated by men, a sport that requires not just physical strength but also immense mental resolve. Wrestling, a sport that was considered a man's domain, a sport where women were spectators, not participants. And yet, in this world of sweat, strength, and struggle, there was one woman who was not afraid to step into the ring, a woman who was not scared to face her opponents, no matter who they were, a woman who was ready to challenge the most formidable wrestlers of her time. She was fierce, she was bold, and she was ready to take on the world. This woman was not just a wrestler. She was a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for countless women. She was a trailblazer, a pioneer who was willing to risk it all to carve out her own path. This fearless woman who openly challenged male wrestlers and broke barriers was none other than Hamida Banu. Born in the early 20th century, Hamida Banu's life was anything but ordinary from the start. Hailing from a humble family in India, her story is one of resilience, courage, and a fierce determination to break societal norms. Her journey into wrestling was not a conventional one. Growing up, Hamida was surrounded by a culture that was rooted in traditional gender roles. Women were expected to stay at home, while men dominated the physical sports like wrestling. But Hamida was different. She was a firebrand, a rebel at heart. As a child, she would often sneak out to watch the boys wrestle, her fascination with the sport growing with each passing day. Her parents, though initially hesitant, recognized her passion for wrestling. They made a choice that was unusual for the time. They let her train. Hamida was just 12 when she started learning the art of wrestling under the tutelage of a local coach. However, her journey was far from smooth. She was the only girl in a pack of boys, often ridiculed and sidelined. But Hamida was not one to back down. She took every challenge head-on, proving her worth not just to her coach, but also to her peers. The wrestling pit became her second home, the place where she could express herself freely. She trained tirelessly, her body often aching from the grueling sessions, but her spirit remained unbroken. Hamida was not just fighting for herself, she was fighting for all the women who were told they couldn't, they shouldn't. She faced numerous obstacles, from societal pressure to financial constraints, but her resolve never wavered. She knew the road to becoming a wrestler was a rocky one, especially for a woman. Yet she persisted, fueled by her unwavering passion for the sport and a burning desire to prove her detractors wrong. Despite the odds stacked against her, Hamida Banu was determined to make her mark in the wrestling world. And she did, in more ways than one. But that's a story for another scene. For now, let's marvel at the courage of a young girl who dared to dream, dared to defy, and dared to wrestle. Hamida Banu didn't just step into the wrestling ring, she owned it. She entered a world that was predominantly male, a world that had never seen a woman dare to compete. But she didn't let that stop her. Hamida Banu didn't just compete, she challenged. She challenged not just her opponents, but the entire notion of what a woman could and couldn't do. For Hamida Banu, wrestling wasn't just a sport, it was her passion, her life. And she trained hard for it. Every single day she would spend hours honing her skills, learning new moves, perfecting old ones. She was a dedicated athlete, always striving to be better than she was the day before. Hamida Banu's matches were more than just fights, they were performances. She would step into the ring with confidence, her eyes burning with determination. She would face her opponents, no matter how big or strong they were, and give them a fight they would never forget. And she didn't just take on female opponents. No, Hamida Banu openly challenged male wrestlers. But her fights weren't just about winning. They were about proving a point. They were about showing the world that women could compete in a sport that was considered a man's domain. They were about breaking barriers and challenging societal norms. And she did just that. Hamida Banu was more than just a wrestler. She was a symbol of empowerment. She was a beacon of change. She showed the world that women weren't just capable of competing in wrestling, they could excel in it. Hamida Banu's journey in the wrestling ring wasn't easy. She faced obstacles, she faced criticism, but she never let that deter her. She stood strong, she fought hard, and she made her mark not just in the ring, but in the hearts of millions. Hamida Banu made the wrestling ring a platform for challenging societal norms and proving that women can excel in any field. Hamida Banu's legacy goes beyond the wrestling ring. She was more than just a wrestler. She was a symbol of resilience, a pioneer and a role model. Her audacious spirit won her not only matches but also hearts and minds. Her tenacity and courage garnered her recognition and accolades that echoed far beyond the boundaries of the wrestling ring. Hamida Banu was the harbinger of a new dawn for women in Indian sports. Her achievements were not just her own, but belonged to every woman who dared to dream beyond societal norms. Her name was etched in gold in the annals of Indian sports history when she was awarded the prestigious Arjuna Award, a recognition given by the Indian government for outstanding achievement in sports. This was a monumental moment that signaled that women too could wrestle, they too could be champions, and they too could be heroes. But her legacy doesn't stop there. Hamida Banu was a beacon of inspiration for future generations of female wrestlers. She demonstrated that the wrestling ring wasn't a place reserved solely for men. She showed that women, with their strength, skill, and determination, could also claim their rightful place in the sport. Thanks to her, the path for female wrestlers became a little less rocky, the journey a bit less daunting. She was also a champion for gender equality in sports. In a time when gender bias was rampant, she challenged the status quo, boldly stepping into a male-dominated arena. She proved that strength and skill knew no gender. This was her crusade, her fight for equality, and she won, not just for herself, but for all women who would follow in her footsteps. Hamida Banu's story is a testament to her indomitable spirit and her relentless pursuit of equality. Her tale is one of courage and determination, of breaking barriers and shattering stereotypes. It is a story that deserves to be told and remembered, a story that continues to inspire and motivate. Hamida Banu, the first female wrestler of India, a true trailblazer, left behind a legacy that continues to shine brightly, illuminating the path for future generations. Hamida Banu's story is not just about wrestling, it's about breaking barriers and challenging the status quo. As we trace the arc of Hamida Banu's life, we see a narrative that transcends wrestling. Beyond the sweat and grappling, beyond the cheers and the jeers, lies a tale of a woman who dared to step into a man's world, defying societal norms and prejudices. Hamida Banu was born in a time when women were expected to confine themselves to the four walls of their homes. But she defied these expectations and stepped into the wrestling ring, a domain dominated by men. She was the first woman to do so in India, and she did it with such grace and determination that she left a mark on the sport that can never be erased. But Hamida Banu's impact goes beyond wrestling. She was a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for countless women who dared to dream beyond their circumstances. She proved that gender was no barrier to achievement, that a woman could do anything a man could do. Her legacy continues to inspire future generations. Today, we see a growing number of women in wrestling, and in sports in general, breaking records and pushing boundaries. And when they do, they stand on the shoulders of giants like Hamida Banu. She might have been the first, but because of her, she wasn't the last. She paved the way for others to follow, to dream, to fight, and to win. She showed us that our potential is not defined by our gender but by our courage, our determination and our passion. Hamida Banu was more than a wrestler. She was a trailblazer, a rebel, and a beacon of hope for all women who dare to dream beyond societal norms. Her story is a testament to the power of resilience and the indomitable spirit of women. She showed us that the wrestling ring is not just a place for men, but a platform where women can prove their mettle and make their mark. Hamida Banu was more than a wrestler. She was a trailblazer, a rebel, and a beacon of hope for all women who dare to dream beyond societal norms.